can I see a show of hands? How many of you are familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill UFO case? Quite a few. Thank you. For those who don't know, Betty and Barney were my aunt and uncle, and on September 19, 1961, they were returning to their home on the seacoast of New Hampshire after they had been on a brief vacation to Niagara Falls and then on to Toronto and then to Montreal. They were driving home at night when they had a close encounter with a UFO. My uncle had conscious, continuous recall of observing non-human entities looking down at him, dressed in black, shiny uniforms, who frightened him greatly because he said he was afraid they had a plan. And that plan was to capture him, like a bug in a net, he said. He broke away, he ran back to the car, and then he and my aunt heard a series of code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk of the vehicle. They felt a tingling sensation pass through their bodies, and the car vibrated. The next thing they knew, they were 35 miles down the road with very little recall of what had happened in the interim. They remembered encountering a roadblock somewhere along the way, but they didn't know where that was. They remembered observing a fiery orb that was sitting in the road in front of what seemed to be tall trees. They didn't know where or when that occurred, but they realized that it was moving, but they were not moving at that point. When they arrived home, they felt dirtier than usual, than you would feel if you just were driving on a trip, on a road trip during the day, hardly getting out of the car. And there was physical evidence. My aunt's dress was torn in several locations. It had been in fine condition when she'd put it on the morning before. My uncle's best dress shoes were so deeply scraped that he had to buy new shoes. The watches they were wearing had stopped working and never worked again. The area of the trunk where they heard those buzzing sounds striking was covered with shiny circles. And when they placed a compass over those circles at the suggestion of a physicist who was one of our neighbors, the needle would spin and spin, indicating a magnetic field, and we've seen that over and over again in UFO abduction cases. We called it an abduction back then. Barney was terribly traumatized by it. Betty, not so much, but she had her own working through to do. A couple of years later, they underwent separate hypnosis for a period of 6 months. Dr. Benjamin Simon, who was a renowned psychiatrist, hypnotized the two of them separately, and they both gave the same details of what had occurred on that night of September 19 and into the early morning hours of September 20th, 1961.